The Holy Gospel according to John. Glory to you, O Lord. Now, before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. It's so simple, deceptively even. This new commandment at the heart of this day, so named Maundy Mandatum, Commandment Thursday. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. I imagine it couldn't have been easy, even and perhaps especially for the one commanding. Jesus knew that his hour had come. Jesus knew who was to betray him. Jesus knew who was to deny him and to abandon him. Jesus knew all of this, and yet he loves them to the end. We get a very specific, tangible, if not a little bizarre example of what that kind of love looks like. As Jesus gets up from the table, takes off his outer robe, ties a towel around himself, pours water into a basin, and begins to wash his disciples' feet. Now, to be sure, foot washing was a common practice of hospitality in the first century world, but it was also dirty work. Work that would have been relegated to a slave, or something that a host's guests would have had to do for themselves. But here, as Jesus is so keen on doing, he flips the practice on its head. The master becomes the servant, the teacher taking the form of a slave, emptying himself before those whom his social world would have deemed lesser or inferior, emptying himself even before the one who would deny ever knowing him. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. I imagine it also could not have been easy for Jean Valjean, prisoner 24601, the protagonist at the heart of Victor Hugo's classic novel turned musical, Les Miserables. He would have had every reason to become embittered, sentenced to 19 years of hard labor for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his starving family, and finally released on parole only to be shunned at every turn as he tries to find work and even a place to live, simply because he's an ex-convict. Which makes his own journey toward redemption increasingly more selfless as the musical progresses, all the more remarkable. It's one of the most well-known lines in the musical, and there are many. And still it struck me by surprise and even moved me to tears as I heard it sung again this past week. In his dying breath, reflecting on all that has transpired in his life, Valjean sings, "To love another person is to see the face of God." The love of which Valjean sings is redemptive. It is disarming. It is his salvation. Truly, it makes no sense. This is the kind of love with which Jesus loved his disciples to the end. This is the kind of love that compels Jesus to stoop down in what is perhaps one of the most intimate and vulnerable moments of connection they experience together, even with those who would betray and deny him. Jesus' love, the love to which we are commanded this night to embody ourselves, is a self-emptying love which is wholly concerned for the other. It's a love which knows no bounds, and it's a love in which we are enveloped by a God who comes to us in the flesh, emptying God's self in Jesus for us and for the life of the world. It's a love that doesn't often make much sense to us, and it is our salvation. Jesus' love with which he loves us to the end is a vulnerable, extravagant love. It's a love which holds no regard for human standards. It's a love without prerequisites or limits or exceptions. It is a love poured out for us in the water that washes over our feet, in the waters that wash over us in our baptism. It is a love set before us at this table, in this meal. It is a love with arms extended wide on the cross. This is a love indeed with the power to transform us, with the power to transform the world. To love another person is to see the face of God. And so seen, there is no going back. Valjean's final words give way to the chorus's final defiant reprise. Do you hear the people sing? Lost in the valley of the night, it is the music of a people who are climbing to the light. For the wretched of the earth, there is a flame that never dies. Even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. It's so simple, deceptively simple, and far from easy. love one another. And it is a powerful reminder. Love one another. Bear witness to the flame that never dies, even in the darkest nights. In these 3 days, sing of the revolutionary triumph of the cross and the feast of victory for our God. Tonight, sing of the love that loves us and all creation, the love that loves us to the very end.